I should have let that night die behind me, the way a man buries every mistake he ever made. But God knows, I stepped off the trail the moment 2 children called me Pa. Jonah Mercer rode into the blizzard with nothing left in his pockets but guilt. Guilt for a wife and daughter he couldn't save, and a son who hadn't spoken in 4 long years. But before dawn, the storm forced a choice no decent man could outrun. A woman half frozen in the snow, and a little girl gripping his boot like judgment itself. He carried them home, not knowing she owned half the territory, not knowing the child wasn't hers, not knowing a man named Silas Kline had already priced their lives on paper. By Christmas week, Jonah's roof would burn, his boy would be taken, and the road to Red Hollow would open like a grave waiting for a name. And the cruelest part? The moment Jonah saved those 2 strangers was the moment he doomed his own family to be hunted again. Because sometimes God sends a blessing in the shape of a burden, and sometimes a child's whisper in the dark is the sound of a miracle about to break a man's heart. But here's the part Jonah never told anyone. The boy wasn't the only one who found his voice that night in the mine. If you love Western tales of grit, faith, and second chances, make sure to subscribe. Watch this story all the way to the end. You won't believe how far a father will ride for the ones he loves. And tell me in the comments, what city are you watching from? Don't die on me. Jonah Mercer's voice came out in a broken rasp, torn raw by the wind. He was already on his knees in the snow, gloves tossed aside, bare hands pressed hard against the woman's chest. Her coat was stiff with ice. Her lips were the color of old bruises. He shoved down once, twice, counted under his breath, though the numbers tangled. Snow swirled around them like ash from some white fire. "Breathe," he growled. "Come on, ma'am. Breathe." The wind hit like a fist. It slammed into his back, tried to peel him off her, tried to smear them both flat into the drift. Bonnie, his mare, danced in place just beyond his shoulder, snorting steam. The reins trailed from the horn. Somewhere behind her, he could hear the rasp of a smaller breath. Eli stood there, half hidden by the storm, one mittened hand clamped in the back of Jonah's coat. The boy didn't make a sound. He never did. Not for 4 years. But Jonah could feel his son's fear clawing up his spine all the same. "I should have ridden past," Jonah muttered, more to God than to himself. "Should have kept my head down and gone on home." He pushed again, arms burning, fingers numb. The woman's head lolled uselessly. Snow had settled in her dark hair, on her lashes, on the high, fine line of a cheekbone that didn't belong on this road. Under his thumbs, her ribs shifted. Nothing else did. "Lord, I've watched enough dying. Don't make me do this again. Pa." It wasn't even a word. Just the ghost of one, scraped out of Eli's throat by the cold. Jonah's hands stuttered, then slammed harder, faster, the way he'd seen the army doctor do once when a man dropped in the mud. "Not now, son," he panted. "Don't you look at her. You hear me? You look at me." He leaned down, put his ear close to the woman's mouth. Nothing. Only the roar of the storm and the drum of his own heart. He turned his head, pressed 2 fingers hard against the side of her neck, digging under the frozen collar. For one awful stretch of seconds, there was nothing. Then there. A flutter. Weak as a lie. But there. Jonah sucked in a breath that burned his lungs. "All right," he whispered. "All right." You're not done yet." He sat back on his heels, snow seeping through the knees of his pants, and that was when he saw the other shape. At first he thought it was just more scrub brush, hunched under the weight of the storm. Then the next gust tore the veil of snow aside, and he saw a hand. Small, gloveless. Fingers curled around the roots of a twisted pine. Jonah lurched to his feet. "Stay put," he barked over his shoulder, though Eli's grip only tightened. Jonah peeled his son's hand off his coat and set it firmly on the horn of Bonnie's saddle. "Hold on to her. Don't let go for anything." He didn't wait for an answer. He crashed through the drift, boots sinking to mid-calf, snow pounding at his legs. Each step felt like dragging chain. The small shape didn't move. When he reached the pine, the wind dropped just enough for him to see her clearly. A girl, maybe 8 or 9, hunched against the trunk like she'd tried to crawl inside it. A red wool scarf was wound 3 times around her neck, stiff with frozen breath. Her bare wrist had a dark ring around it, like a rope burn. Her eyes were open. They stared straight ahead, unfocused, lashes spiked with ice. "Hey," Jonah said, voice softer than he meant it to be. He crouched, snow soaking through his coat. "Hey now." He touched her shoulder. It was hard as the tree behind her. For one sick instant he thought he was too late again. Then the girl flinched. Just a twitch, hardly more than a shiver. But her gaze snapped to his face, sharp and terrified and so tired it made his chest hurt. She didn't cry, didn't speak. Her lips trembled once. Her fingers clawed at his sleeve like hooks. "Easy," he said. "You're all right. I got you." He shrugged out of his own coat, the thin wool no match for the storm, and wrapped it around her shoulders. She was lighter than she looked. Bones and air and a little stubbornness. Behind him, the woman lay half buried. Eli clung to the saddle horn, small boots braced in the stirrup leather, eyes wide and dark. 2 of them, Jonah thought. 1 horse. 3 miles to the cabin, if they didn't get themselves turned around. The wind screamed through the pass, driving needles of snow into his dull, exposed wrists. Bonnie stamped and shook her head, ears pinned. Jonah closed his eyes for a heartbeat, saw another winter in the dark red behind his lids, another fever, another small body going still. He opened them again. "Fine," he said, to the sky, to the storm, to whatever watched a broke-down blacksmith on Christmas week. "You win. I'm not leaving 'em." He hefted the girl into his arms. She made a small sound then, a scraped whimper, and a word that might have been "mama," or might have been nothing at all. Her scarf slipped, and he saw more of that dark bruise on her wrist where someone had tied her like a calf. Anger sparked under his ribs, there and gone. No time for that now. He staggered back to Bonnie. Eli reached for the girl without prompting, small arms as steady as he could make them. "Here," Jonah said. He swung the child up to the saddle, settled her in front of his boy. "You hold her, you hear? Like you'd hold on to me." Eli nodded, jaw tight. He wrapped both arms around the girl's middle and pulled her back against his chest. The girl's head fell against his shoulder. Her eyes slid half shut. Jonah turned to the woman. Her hair was half buried now, dark against the white. He shoved snow away from her face with the side of his hand, muttering apologies under his breath. He got his arms under her and lifted. She wasn't heavy either. Not for a man who'd lifted an anvil yesterday and a plow the day before. But the cold made his muscles sluggish, turned every movement thick and clumsy. By the time he got her to the horse, his breath was coming in ragged bursts. He set her sideways across the saddle, braced against Bonnie's withers, her head lolling against Eli's other shoulder. The boy was sandwiched between strangers now, one in front, one behind. His eyes met Jonah's over the woman's still face. Fear lived there, but something else too, something like a question. "Almost home," Jonah said, though his tongue stuck to his teeth. He grabbed the reins, slid his numb feet back into the snow, and clicked his tongue. "Come on, girl, one more climb." Bonnie snorted, ears flicking back, then forward. She stepped into the drift, pushing chest deep through the white. Jonah walked beside her, one hand on the horn, the other on the woman's shoulder to keep her from sliding. The snow tried to swallow his boots every time he lifted them. The wind shoved him sideways. Once the world went white so completely he couldn't see the horse at all. Only Eli's mittened hand groping down from above, finding his sleeve, holding on. "I see you," Jonah said. "Don't you let go, son. Not for anything." They inched along the trail, more by memory than sight. Jonah counted fence posts under his breath when he found them, rough wood against his palm. The sky above was a solid lid of gray. Somewhere under it, the first of the Christmas bells in town would be ringing for evening service. He'd meant to be there this year, meant to sit in the back pew, hat in his hands, and say a few words to the God he mostly argued with. Nothing fancy. Just thanks for one more winter with his boy. Instead, he was out here dragging 3 souls through a blizzard, one heartbeat away from losing them all. "Don't you dare," he muttered, not sure whether he was speaking to the woman in the saddle, the girl in his coat, or the Lord above. "Don't you take nobody from me, not tonight." The land dipped, then rose. For a terrible, sliding second, he thought he'd missed the turn. Then the wind shifted, and there it was, a smudge of darker shadow against the white, where the cabin hunkered under the hill. Smoke seeped from the crooked chimney, thin and blue. Home, such as it was. Jonah's knees almost went out from under him in relief. He forced them to lock again. "See that?" he called up, voice hoarse. "We're near there. You hold on just a little longer, ma'am. Little miss, we're near there now." The woman didn't answer. The girl didn't move. Eli's fingers just dug deeper into Jonah's sleeve. He didn't know it yet. But the moment he shouldered that cabin door open with his boot and dragged those strangers into his life, nothing in Copper Creek, or in his own heart, was ever going to be the same again. Jonah kicked the door wide with his boot, and the storm howled in behind him like a cursed thing. The hinges shrieked. Heat, thin as a dying breath, spilled out from the stove in the corner. "Get inside," he told Eli. "Quick now." The boy obeyed, guiding the girl with the scarf still wrapped around her throat. Her feet dragged over the warped boards, leaving crumbs of snow that melted on contact. Bonnie stamped outside, shaking ice from her mane. Jonah swung the woman off the saddle. God, she was cold, and carried her across the threshold. The lantern hanging from a nail jittered in the draft, throwing shadows with long, broken legs across the walls. He laid the woman on his own bed. The thin mattress sank beneath her weight. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. "Stay with me," Jonah muttered. "Hear me, ma'am? Stay." He stripped off her gloves, worked the frozen fingers between his palms, forcing warmth into them. His own hands burned with the effort. He'd done this before, years back, on another winter night, when the fever had taken too much, too fast. He swallowed hard, keeping the memory down where it belonged. "Pa," Eli whispered, voice cracking on the single syllable. Jonah jerked his head. His son stood by the stove, holding the girl up with both arms. She leaned into him like she'd melt if he let her go. Her eyes were half-lidded, heavy with exhaustion or fear, maybe both. "Sit her down," Jonah said. "Right there. Keep her near the heat." Eli guided her to the low stool by the stove. The girl trembled so hard her teeth clicked. Jonah tossed more wood onto the fire, ragged splits of pine that smoked before they caught. Flame licked up the blackened sides of the stove, throwing a fresh wash of orange over the room. The girl's gaze latched onto the light. Something in her shoulders eased. "Good," Jonah murmured. "That's good." He turned back to the woman. Her breath fogged faintly, too faintly. He loosened the brass buttons of her coat, one at a time, fingers clumsy with cold and urgency. When he opened the last one, he paused. Fine fabric, tailored, not the kind any freight hand or farmer's wife would ever afford. The thread glinted where the lamplight hit it. Trouble, he thought. Trouble dressed up like grace. He pulled a quilt over her chest and eased her closer to the stove. She didn't stir. Her lashes were wet. Jonah bent close, listening for the rasp of breath. It came, shallow, stubborn. "Thank you," he whispered, and didn't know if he meant the woman or the Lord. Behind him, something clattered. He spun around. The girl, Lily, he remembered the woman calling her once before she went fully under, had nudged her little cloth bag off her knee. Items spilled out. A cracked wooden horse, a single mitten, a folded scrap of paper. Eli crouched to help her gather it all back, his small hands careful. When the boy reached for the paper, she snatched it first, held it tight, shook her head. Jonah saw the panic in her eyes, saw the trust in Eli's, felt the weight of both. "All right," he said softly. "You keep it. Ain't nobody taking what's yours." The girl blinked. Maybe that was understanding. Maybe it was thanks. Hard to tell in the dim. Jonah went to the cupboard, grabbed the kettle, filled it with the last of yesterday's meltwater. He set it on the stove, listening to the metal tick as it heated. Eli slipped a glance toward him. Then the boy reached into his coat, found his slate, and wrote with a piece of chalk no bigger than his thumbnail. "Cold?" He turned the slate toward the girl. She read it, blinked again, and nodded. Just once. Jonah froze. He hadn't seen Eli write for a stranger in God. He didn't know how long. Not since before the sickness stole his voice and half his heart. Something fluttered in Jonah's chest. Hope or fear, hard to say which hurt worse. The kettle began its slow whistle. Jonah poured hot water into a tin cup, added a spoonful of dried mint. The smell lifted into the room, a thin ghost of summer. He carried it to the woman on the bed. held the cup to her lips. When a drop touched her mouth, her throat worked. She swallowed. "Good," he breathed. "You fight. You hear? You keep fightin'." Outside, the storm hammered at the walls. Snow rattled the shutters like someone begging to be let in. Jonah sat back on the edge of the bed, wiped his brow with the back of his wrist, and looked at the three souls gathered in his one-room cabin. His boy, this half-frozen woman, this frightened child with rope burns on her wrists. He didn't know why the Lord had driven him up that ridge today. Didn't know what kind of world sent two females into a blizzard with death on their heels. But he knew this: I wasn't meant to ride past them. The wind screamed again, and the rafters groaned. Eli pressed closer to the girl. The girl clutched her scarf. The woman breathed one thin, stubborn breath after another. Jonah rose, checked the latch on the door, shoved a piece of wood under the gap where snow tried to creep in. He moved without thinking. Old habits from other winters, other nights heavy with worry. When he turned back, the woman's eyes fluttered. Just barely, like a moth testing its wings. "Easy now," he murmured. Her lips parted, shaping a sound he couldn't catch. Eli watched from the stool, slate clutched in his fists. The girl clung to his sleeve. Jonah leaned closer, heart thudding. The woman's voice was a whisper made of smoke and frost. "Lily, don't let them." Her breath shivered out. Her eyes slipped shut again. Jonah looked toward the girl with the red scarf, then at the bruises on her wrists. Something cold threaded through his veins, colder than any winter storm. He didn't know it yet, but whatever hunted these two had just found his house. And the snow outside wasn't the only thing trying to get in. Jonah didn't move at first. He stood there, eyes fixed on the woman's lips, as if they might shape another word. Something clearer. Something that could name whatever chased her and that little girl through the storm. But her breath only fluttered. Her lashes didn't lift again. Eli shifted on the stool, slate in his lap, chalk trembling between his fingers. The girl, Lily, pressed closer to him, scarf slipping off one shoulder. Jonah crossed the room and wrapped the quilt from the cot around her thin frame. "You're safe in here," he said. "Ain't nobody getting past me tonight." He meant it. But as soon as the words left his mouth, the wind changed. Not the loud kind that screamed through the cracks. This was lower, rounder, like something heavy sliding along the porch boards outside. Jonah's hand went to the old rifle leaning behind the stove. He didn't pick it up. Not yet. He just rested his fingers along the stock, feeling the familiar worn wood, the smooth place where his thumb had lived for years. Eli's head snapped toward the door. The girl followed his gaze, small shoulders tensing. Jonah lifted a hand. "Hush now," then stepped forward just enough to hear past the heartbeat hammering in his ears. Another sound. Soft, measured. Not wind, not snow. Bootsteps. "Pa?" Eli's voice cracked, barely more than breath. Jonah's jaw tightened. "Stay put, son." He moved to the window, the little square one above the wash basin, and wiped a circle in the frost with the heel of his palm. Outside was nothing but white, swirling like ghosts fighting each other. But ghosts didn't leave tracks. He angled his head and caught it. the faintest dark shape moving toward his porch. Slow, testing the boards. Someone was out there. He backed away, let the curtain fall. His pulse thumped in his throat, steady and controlled, the way it used to when trouble walked into the forge and asked for work paid under the table. The woman on the bed stirred again, a faint, broken sound. Lily looked at her, then at Jonah, panic flickering in her eyes, quick and sharp. Jonah knelt in front of the girl. "You know who's out there?" She didn't speak, but her fingers tightened on that little cloth bag, tight enough to show she did. "All right," Jonah murmured. "All right." He stood, reached for the rifle. This time he took it. The metal was cold in his hands, but it steadied him more than any prayer. He cracked the breech, checked the round, closed it soft. No clack, no warning. The steps outside paused. Jonah's breath did too. Then, a knock. Gentle. Too gentle to be friendly. "Evenin'," a man's voice called through the door. Light, unhurried. "Cold night to be wanderin', Mr. Mercer." Jonah's blood went cold. He hadn't given his name to anyone today. He motioned Eli farther back. The boy obeyed, pulling Lily with him until both were tucked beside the bed frame. The voice outside chuckled low. "Heard you came across some travelers up the ridge. Mighty dangerous weather for folks who don't know the land." Jonah didn't answer. Silence was safer. "Thing is," the man continued, "I got reason to believe those ladies ain't yours to keep." Jonah felt something old and stubborn rise inside him. He stepped closer to the door, kept the rifle angled toward the floor. "You lost something?" he asked, voice flat as an anvil. "Oh, not me." The boards creaked under the man's shifting weight. "But Silas Kline, well, he don't take kindly to people interferin' in his arrangements." The name hit the air like a coal dropped in snow, still hot enough to burn. Jonah said nothing. The man outside sighed as if disappointed. "Tell you what, Mr. Mercer, hand the woman over. Hand the child over. Kline'll see you're compensated." Jonah's stomach clenched. He thought of the envelope earlier that year, thick with bills. Thought of Eli's slate, roof leaks. The wind moaned through the chinks in the wall as if waiting on his answer. The man's voice softened. "Ain't no shame in takin' what's owed. Winter's hard. Money's clean. You do the right thing, and nobody has to get hurt." Jonah closed his eyes for a heartbeat. Saw his wife's face, saw their daughter. Saw what it cost him the last time he let fear make his choices. He opened his eyes. "No," he said. A pause. A surprised huff of laughter. "Sir, maybe you didn't hear me proper. I heard you." Jonah's voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "Ain't leaving nobody out there for your boss to use." The porch boards creaked again, this time sharper, a shift in weight, a temper showing its teeth. "Well," the man drawled, "that's a pity." Something scraped, metal on leather. Jonah lifted the rifle. "Pa," Eli whispered again, chalk falling from his hand. Jonah didn't look back. He kept his eyes on the door, feet planted, breath steady. Outside, the man chuckled, low, mean. "We'll be seeing you soon, Mercer." Bootsteps retreated across the porch, then down the path, then swallowed by the wind. Jonah waited, counted to 30, to 50. Only when the storm was the only voice again did he lower the gun. He turned toward the bed. The woman's eyes were open, just barely, and she was looking straight at him. "Don't," she rasped. "Don't let him take her." Her gaze flicked toward Lily. Then she slipped under again. Jonah stood there a long moment, rifle still in his hands, snow still hissing against the door, his son clutching the girl beside the bed like she was something precious he'd been trusted with. He didn't know yet how deep this trouble ran. What he did know, what settled in his bones like scripture, was this: he wasn't giving up either of them. Not to Silas Kline, not to the storm, not to anyone. Jonah set the rifle back behind the stove, though every part of him wanted it in reach. The cabin walls felt thinner now. The storm no longer sounded like weather. It sounded like something covering tracks. He dragged a stool closer to the bed and sat. The woman's breathing scraped shallow, too weak for a fight, too stubborn for surrender. Her face, even in the dim light, looked carved out of fine stone, strong lines softened only by exhaustion. Lily watched her with wide, unblinking eyes. Eli watched Jonah, chalk forgotten in his fist. The kettle hissed again. Jonah rose, poured fresh hot water, added a pinch of dried herbs he'd saved for fevers. It wasn't much, but a man gave what he had. He lifted the woman's head with one hand, offered the cup with the other. Her lips brushed the rim, barely there, but she swallowed a sip. "That's it," Jonah murmured. "You keep breathing. I'll keep the rest." When he set the cup down, Lily suddenly moved. She slid off the stool, crossed the room in 3 small steps, and tugged at Jonah's sleeve. Hard. Jonah knelt without thinking. "What is it, little miss?" She didn't answer. Instead, she reached for the woman's hand, small fingers wrapping around cold ones. Then she looked up at Jonah with a strange fierceness, as if daring him to promise something he didn't understand. "I ain't letting her go," Jonah said quietly. "You hear me? Not to that man outside. Not to anyone." Something eased in the girl's shoulders. She released his sleeve, went back to the stove, and sat again beside Eli. A log popped in the fire. Shadows jumped along the walls. Jonah turned to his boy. "You all right?" Eli nodded once. Then slowly, he picked up his chalk and wrote, "Is he coming back?" Jonah met his son's dark, steady eyes. They were things a father shouldn't lie about. Not if he wanted a child to grow straight. "Yes," Jonah wrote in his head. But he said, "Not tonight." The boy studied him, trying to hear the part Jonah didn't say. Outside, the wind snarled like a starved coyote. Jonah stood again, restless. He paced the short length of the cabin, 3 steps one way, 3 steps back. Every creak of the floorboard felt like a threat. Every gust of wind sounded like boots returning. He checked the latch, then checked it again. Behind him, the woman stirred. Her fingers curled slightly, like she was reaching for something in a dream. The movement drew him back to her bedside. He sat, watched her chest rise and fall, thought about what the stranger said. Silas Kline, a name he'd heard in town. A man who bought people before he bought land. A man who never got his hands dirty because he'd already paid someone else to do it. Jonah rubbed a hand over his beard. He didn't know what Kline wanted with this woman or the girl, but the bruises on Lily's wrists told him enough. Lord, don't let me fail him. The woman's eyelids fluttered again. Her gaze drifted toward the stove, then toward the children bundled beside it. For a heartbeat, Jonah thought she might speak. She didn't. Instead, a single tear slid from the corner of her eye and vanished into the quilt. Jonah looked away, jaw tight. He could carry weight. He always had. But some kinds of sorrow felt like they asked too much. He stood to fetch another blanket. When he turned back, Eli was beside the woman, small fingers resting on the quilt near her arm. The boy wasn't shaking. He wasn't afraid. He was steady. Watching her the same way Jonah had once watched over his wife, hoping breath would stay. Something in Jonah's throat pulled tight. "Son," he whispered. Eli didn't move. Jonah crouched beside him. "You remember what I told you? We take care of folks under our roof. It's what a Mercer does." The boy blinked once. Then he set the slate down and reached for the woman's hand. Her fingers twitched in return. Lily, still near the stove, sucked in a small breath, sharp with recognition, with hope. She stood and crept back to the bedside. Eli shifted so she could climb onto the edge of the mattress. The two children sat shoulder to shoulder, one silent by nature, one silent by fear, guarding a woman who looked too fine for a place like this. Jonah watched them. He didn't know what bound the girl to the woman, or what kind of life they'd run from. But he saw the truth in front of him. Whatever family they had before was gone. Whatever protection they had was lost. And somehow, on a night meant for Christmas hymns and warm lanterns, the Lord had driven them into his hands. The woman whispered something, just a breath, a slip of sound. Jonah leaned close. "Don't let him take her." Her fingers clenched weakly around Lily's. Jonah closed his eyes for a moment, letting the weight of that settle. "I won't," he said. "On my life, ma'am, I won't." A gust slammed the cabin wall. Snow sifted down from the rafters like cold ashes. Jonah stood and checked the window again. The world outside was a blur of white and moving shadow. Nothing solid, nothing certain. He stepped back, stirred the fire, adjusted the woman's blanket, straightened Eli's collar, pulled the quilt tighter around Lily. Small tasks, quiet ones, the sort a man did when he was bracing for something he couldn't yet name. When he finally sat again, the rifle leaning close at hand, he felt the shift in the room, subtle, like the cabin itself had started holding its breath. The storm hadn't passed. It had only changed its shape. The storm eased near midnight, not in mercy, but in warning. Jonah heard it in the way the wind softened, like something stepping back only to take aim again. He sat at the edge of the bed, elbows on his knees, watching the woman breathe. Each rise of her chest felt borrowed. Each fall felt like it might be the last. Her skin carried the faint warmth of the stove now, but not enough. Not yet. He pressed 2 fingers against the side of her neck. There. A pulse. Thin. Stubborn. "Don't you quit on me," he thought. "Not tonight." Behind him, Eli had fallen asleep upright against the wall. Lily curled under his arm like a stray pup, trusting warmth more than logic. A quilt covered them both. Their shadows flickered along the logs as the fire dipped low. Jonah rose to feed the stove. He knelt, shoved more wood inside. Sparks leapt, flared, settled. When he shut the stove door, he spotted the girl watching him through half-closed lashes, pretending to sleep, but not quite pulling it off. "You're safe," he whispered. Her fingers tightened in Eli's shirt. He stood again, rubbing the cold out of his hands. The woman on the mattress, fine-boned, strong-jawed, wrapped in his threadbare quilt, shifted faintly. Her brow creased as though she dreamed something sharp. Jonah leaned closer. "Easy, ma'am. You're in my cabin. Storm's outside." As if answering something in her dream, her lips parted. A single word slipped free. "Lily." Jonah's head turned toward the girl. She froze. Her chin trembled, but she didn't cry. The woman's breathing hitched. Jonah touched her shoulder gently. The muscle twitched beneath his palm. "You're all right," he murmured. "Both of you are." But he wasn't sure. Not with Kline's man returning to the dark. Not with boot prints already under the snow. He sat back down, rubbing his hands together. The warmth of the fire didn't reach the knot in his stomach. "Pa?" Eli's voice broke the hush, soft, cracked, but a voice, an honest voice. Jonah's heart kicked so hard he had to steady himself. "Yeah, son." The boy blinked slow, waking fully. He reached for his slate, hesitated, then didn't use it. He nodded toward the bed. "She gonna make it?" Jonah swallowed. "I reckon she's got some fight left." It wasn't a promise, but it wasn't a lie. Eli crawled closer, careful not to wake Lily. He studied the woman's face like a puzzle God himself had put in front of him. "She knows the girl's name," he whispered. "Seems so." Eli's eyes flickered with a thought too heavy for a 7-year-old. He shifted his slate, wrote in slow strokes. "They runnin'?" Jonah let out a breath, long and low. "Looks that way." The boy erased the word and wrote another. "From who?" Jonah didn't answer. He didn't have to. A man doesn't let a child see every shadow in the room. But Eli had already seen more darkness than most grown men. Jonah stood, crossed to the window again. He brushed frost aside, peered into the swirl. The world outside looked dead, empty, deceiving. He saw no lantern, no rider, no shape of a man crouched in the dark. That didn't put him at ease. When he turned back, the woman's eyes were open. Not fully, just enough for him to see their color. Gray. Bright, even in the dim. Sharp with awareness and blurred with weakness. She tried to speak. Nothing came. Jonah poured fresh water, held it to her lips, steady and patient. She swallowed one sip, then another. Her throat bobbed. She coughed, quiet, painful, but it was a real sound, a living sound. "You're all right," Jonah said. "You're inside. Storm's past for now." Her gaze drifted toward Lily. The girl slid off the stool, crossed the little space, and climbed back beside her, tiny fingers seeking the woman's hand. The woman breathed out something like relief. Then she looked at Jonah, really looked at him. A flicker of understanding, a question, a warning. He waited. Her voice came rough. barely a scrape of breath. "Don't let him find her." Jonah nodded once. "I won't. Even if it cost him everything he had left." The woman shut her eyes again, her body sinking deeper into the mattress, exhaustion reclaiming what little strength she'd borrowed. Jonah pulled the quilt higher over her shoulders. "Rest," he whispered. "You're safe here." But even as he said it, he heard the truth under the words. Safety wasn't a thing he could promise. Not tonight. Not with Kline's shadow crawling across their doorstep. He walked back to the stove. The fire snapped. Sparks rose. Eli and Lily had both drifted back into sleep now, leaning on each other like two orphans who had run out of places to run. Jonah watched them long enough to feel the sting behind his eyes. "Lord, don't let me fail him too." He turned away, picked up the rifle, checked the chamber, set it within reach of the bed. Then he sat again, shoulders bent, watching the door as if he could hold it closed with nothing but will. Outside, somewhere past the tree line, a single sound cut through the quiet. One slow, distant creak, like a saddle shifting under a rider who'd stopped to listen. Jonah's jaw tightened. He wasn't sure which would come first. The woman waking, the storm returning, or whoever hunted these two stepping out of the dark. But he knew this. By morning, trouble would have a name, and he'd be standing in front of it. Dawn didn't come gentle. It pushed its way through the frost like a dull blade, smearing gray light across the cabin floorboards. Jonah hadn't slept. He sat against the wall with the rifle across his lap, boots still on, eyes gritty from the long watch. The woman had dozed in fits, breathing slow, shallow, but steady enough that Jonah counted each rise as a victory. Lily had curled up beside her sometime near morning, small hand still locked around the woman's. Eli slept on the floor, blanket tucked to his chin, slate under one arm like a shield he didn't know how to give up. Jonah rubbed his face, listened to the silence outside. The storm had quit some time before dawn, leaving a quiet too clean to trust. He pushed himself to his feet, joints stiff from the cold. He crossed to the window and brushed aside the frost with the back of his hand. Snow covered everything, smooth as porcelain, untouched. At least it looked untouched. Jonah narrowed his eyes. Near the tree line, where a dead cottonwood leaned like a broken mast, the snow wore a faint crease. A trail lightly packed, curving away toward the ridge. Someone had stood there, watched, waited. He let the curtain fall, saw him again. It wasn't a thought. It slipped out like confession. "Lord, you keep giving me chances to run, and I keep staying." Behind him, the woman shifted. Jonah turned in time to see her eyes open, clearer than last night, though still clouded with fever. She tried to lift her head. He moved to her side instantly. "Easy, ma'am. You're safe for now." Her gaze roamed the room, the stove, the children, Jonah, before landing on the door. A flicker of fear crossed her face so fast, it might have been a trick of the light. "Lily?" she whispered. "She's here," Jonah said. "Right beside you." Lily stirred, blinked awake, and touched the woman's cheek with the back of her hand. The woman closed her eyes, leaned into the touch, then forced them open again. Jonah lifted the tin cup, warmed by the stove. Try another sip. She drank, slowly. Each swallow looked like work. When she finished, she licked her lips, breath shaky. Thank you. Jonah shook his head. Ain't no need. But she didn't look away. Her eyes held him steady, sharp despite the weakness. You saved her. Jonah's jaw tensed. Wasn't about choice. She needed help. The woman lay quiet for a long moment. Then she whispered, He won't stop. Jonah didn't answer. He didn't need to. They both knew the truth. Eli woke with a jolt, as if hearing the tail end of danger. He scrambled up, rubbing sleep from his eyes. He grabbed his slate, scribbled quick. The man? Jonah gave a slow nod. Lily's face paled. The woman's fingers trembled. The boy erased the slate, wrote again. Pa. Go? Jonah crouched so they were eye to eye. Not yet. Not unless we have to. Eli studied him, then wrote one more word. Why? Jonah looked at the woman on throne, the bed, at the little girl clutching her hand, at the marks on that small wrist. Because running only works if the devil behind you ain't got a faster horse, he said. And this one does. Something tightened in the woman's throat. She reached, weakly, for the cloth bag at her side. Jonah watched her pull it closer and place it beneath her arm as though she feared the walls themselves might take it from her. What's in there? He asked. Her eyes flickered, but she didn't answer. Not yet. Jonah stood, stretched the stiffness from his back. I'll check the traps. Bring in more wood. Eli, you stay inside. Don't open this door for nothing but my voice. The boy nodded hard. Jonah slipped his coat on, pulled his hat low, and stepped outside. The cold slapped him awake. His breath turned white in front of him. He scanned the tree line, searching for movement. Nothing. Nothing he could see. But he felt it. The way a man feels when steel is near his ribs, even if he can't see the blade. He walked a slow circle around the cabin. The prints were there, faint. One man, heavy step, trying not to leave a trail but not careful enough. The prints pointed toward the river bend, where the land dipped and sound carried far. Jonah crouched beside them, ran his fingers over the packed snow. Too fresh. He straightened and looked over his shoulder at the cabin. Smoke curled from the stovepipe like a flag marking a target. This world takes what you love if you let it. He walked back inside. Eli looked up instantly. Lily shrank behind his shoulder. The woman turned her face toward him, breath catching. Well? She asked. Jonah shut the door behind him, dropped the bar into place. He was here, Jonah said. Didn't come close, just watching. The woman swallowed hard. He'll come back. I know. A long silence settled, the kind that pressed down on a man's ribs and made it hard to breathe. Finally, the woman pulled herself upright, bracing on one elbow. Jonah moved to steady her, but she shook her head. My name, she said, voice thin but sure, is Vivienne Hawthorne. Jonah froze. He knew that name. Everybody in the territory did. The richest cattle empire, the rail contracts, the mining title fights. Folks in town didn't call her by name. They called her the Hawthorne woman. Jonah felt the world tilt, not wildly, just enough to rattle the nails in the floorboards. He looked at Lily, then at the bruises on her wrist, then back at Vivienne. "What in God's name are you running from?" he asked. Vivienne's gaze didn't waver. "The man you turned away last night," she said. "Silas Kline." Eli's slate slipped from his fingers and clattered to the floor, and Jonah understood two things at once. This wasn't trouble passing through. This was trouble moving in. Vivienne Hawthorne didn't look like a woman who should have been dying in a one-room shack. Even half frozen, she held her back straight, jaw set, eyes alive with something that felt too sharp for fear. Jonah wasn't sure what he expected. Maybe a tremble, maybe a sob. Not this. "Silas Kline," she repeated, each syllable steady as iron cooling on an anvil. Jonah's fingers curled against the edge of the table. Eli stepped closer. Lily grabbed the hem of the quilt, knuckles white. Vivienne drew a slow breath. "He believes I have something that belongs to him." Jonah glanced at the little cloth bag under her arm. "That's so." Her gaze didn't move from his. "And he'll tear this territory apart to get it." Jonah's jaw flexed. "Territory's already half broke. Don't need more trouble in it." "He doesn't care what he breaks," she said softly. "Only what he owns." Lily shifted, almost hiding behind her. Vivienne reached out, brushed the girl's cheek with her thumb, a gesture gentle enough to cut Jonah deep in the place he didn't talk about. "He'll come for her," Vivienne whispered. "First for me, then for her." Lily shook her head violently, burying her face in the quilt. Vivienne's own breath hitched. Jonah looked from one to the other. He wasn't a man who asked for stories. Stories had taken enough from him. But this one pressed into the cabin air like a weight. "What's in that bag?" he asked. Vivienne hesitated, then shook her head. "Not yet." Jonah almost pushed. He didn't. A man learned to feel the edges of a truth before he ripped the rest free. "You runnin' from him long?" he asked instead. Vivienne's lashes lowered. "Long enough to learn he never stops. Long enough to lose anyone who tried to help." Lily's fingers gripped tighter. Eli bent to pick up his slate. He wrote slowly, turning the chalk like he was shaping something heavy. "We help?" Vivienne stared at the board, as if the word itself hurt her. She shook her head. No child should bear that cost. Jonah felt something flare under his ribs, hard, protective. "Far as I see it," he said, "they're already bearing it." Vivienne's eyes lifted to his again, gray, weary, fierce. "You turned his man away," she murmured. "You shouldn't have." "I wasn't about to sell 2 souls to a man like that." Her lips parted, not in shock, but in something like acknowledgement, maybe gratitude, maybe warning. "Mr. Mercer," she said quietly, "Kline doesn't need your consent. He only needs time." Jonah didn't answer. A man doesn't argue with truth he already knows. He scratched his jaw, moved to the window, and pushed aside the curtain. Snow shone in the light like crushed glass. Across the hollow, a crow perched on a dead branch, black against the white, watching. He let the curtain fall. "I ain't got much," Jonah said, "but what's under my roof stays safe." Vivienne shook her head gently. "You don't understand. He'll burn the roof to get through it. Then he'll answer to me first." It wasn't pride, wasn't bravado, just a man who had lost enough and wasn't going to lose more. Vivienne's breath trembled, just once. Then she said the words Jonah didn't expect. "You saved my life," she murmured. "I didn't tell you who I was because men treat me different when they know. They look at the land, not the person." Jonah crossed his arms, leaning a shoulder to the wall. "Ma'am, I ain't got land to look at." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "No, you have something rarer." "What's that?" "Decency." Jonah looked at the floorboards, scuffed, uneven. "Decency don't fix much these days." "It keeps you human," she said. "And that's why Kline fears men like you." Jonah lifted his eyes to hers, and for just a breath, there was a feeling in the room he hadn't let himself carry in years. Dangerous, soft, alive. He cut it down before it grew legs. "I'll fetch water," he muttered. "You need more heat." He took the bucket and stepped outside. The cold hit him hard, but not as hard as the sight waiting in the snow. Lines, faint but undeniable, fresh boot prints leading toward the creek, and another set circling back toward the ridge. Someone had stood here not long ago. Someone waiting, deciding, tracking. Jonah followed the first prints with his eyes until they vanished behind a drift. He let the bucket hang from his hand and whispered under his breath, "Lord, I knew peace wouldn't last. Not for me." He filled the bucket, trudged back to the cabin, and set it by the stove. Vivienne watched him, reading his face like a ledger. "You saw something." He didn't lie. "Tracks." Her fingers curled around the quilt. "He's close then." Jonah nodded. Eli's slate scratched. He turned it around. "We leave?" Jonah stared at the word. The room felt too small for the choice inside it. Vivienne closed her eyes. "If you run with us, he'll chase you. He'll use your son to reach me." "I know," Jonah said quietly. Lily crawled closer to him. No words, only trust. The same trust that had been in his own daughter's eyes before winter took her. Jonah swallowed. Vivienne whispered, "There's still time to let us go." He shook his head, slow and final. "Not happening." "Why?" she breathed. Jonah's answer came soft, from a place in him he thought the snow had buried years ago. "'Cause I couldn't save the ones God gave me before." Her breath caught. Eli looked down. Jonah said barely above a whisper, "I ain't failing these two." Silence filled the room. Not empty, full, heavy, binding. Outside, a crow screamed once, sharp as a nail driven into wood. Vivienne looked toward the door. "He'll come today," she said. Jonah tightened his grip on the rifle. "I know." "He come," answered, "and I'll be waiting." By noon, the storm had eased, but the cold bit harder. A thin sun hung over the ridge like a coin polished flat by too many hands. Jonah tightened the rope across the shed door and glanced toward the cabin windows. A shadow moved. Vivienne, checking the fire. Lily close behind her. Eli brushing ash from the stove stones. For a heartbeat, it almost looked like a family. "Lord, don't tempt a man with things he can't keep." He dropped the thought and headed toward the well. That's when the rider appeared, quiet as frost forming on glass, coat dark, hat lower than manners should allow. His horse exhaled white steam as he pulled up beside the fence. "Mr. Mercer?" The stranger tipped his hat, voice polite enough to itch. Jonah didn't answer right away. He set the bucket down, wiped his hands on his coat, and kept 10 good feet between them. "Depends who's askin'." "Name's Henry Sato," the man said, "riding for Hawthorne Holdings." Jonah's shoulders stiffened. "She send you?" "Miss Hawthorne sent a letter," Henry replied, patting his coat. "Said it might find you at the right time." Jonah didn't move to take it. He waited. Henry smiled faintly. "Ain't poison, sir." Jonah finally stepped forward and accepted the envelope. Thick, sealed with black wax, H, carved deep as a warning. He broke the seal with his thumb. As he read, the yard fell silent enough for him to hear the snow settle. "Mr. Mercer, if you're reading this, it means the cost of staying has already begun. North Bend needs a man with steady hands and a clean conscience. There's a house, a wage, a school for your boy, and safety if we move swiftly. Come before sundown. The tracks in your yard are not the last. V. Hawthorne." Jonah folded the letter slowly. Henry watched him with a patience Jonah didn't trust. "She says it's urgent," he said, "and that you can bring the children." Jonah's jaw clenched. "You been near my yard?" "I've been near enough to know you're being watched." Jonah didn't like that answer. Eli stepped out onto the porch, slate held to his chest. Lily hovered behind him, half hidden, half brave. Vivienne appeared last, hand resting lightly on the frame as if steadying herself. Henry tipped his hat to her. "Ma'am." Vivienne gave a single nod. No surprise in her eyes. Only confirmation. She'd expected this. Jonah walked toward her, letter in hand. "What's this about a job?" he asked quietly. Vivienne met his gaze without flinching. "North Bend's been without a foreman since spring. I need someone I can trust." "Why me?" "Because you didn't take Kline's money." Her voice was low, steady. "And you didn't turn away from us last night." Jonah looked away. "Decency don't qualify a man for management." "It qualifies him for guardianship," she said. "And right now, that's what we need most." Lily tugged Jonah's sleeve. "Don't leave us," she whispered, voice barely a breath. Vivienne gently touched the girl's shoulder. "He's not leaving, sweetheart. He'd be coming with us." Jonah stared at the letter again. A house, a wage, a school for Eli. Things he'd prayed for, quietly, without hope. He felt Eli at his side. The boy pressed the slate against Jonah's palm. "Go?" The question hit Jonah harder than the cold. Vivienne stepped nearer, coat brushing his. "If you stay here, he'll circle back. Kline doesn't drop what he wants." Jonah breathed out slow. "You sure you want a man like me on your land?" "I'm sure I want a man who values life over money." Her eyes softened. "North Bend will be safer with you there." Jonah's fingers tightened around the letter. "Lord, show me the road that doesn't take more from my boy." Finally, he nodded. "We'll come." Vivienne released a breath she'd been holding. Lily smiled, small, crooked, hopeful. Henry swung his reins. "I'll guide you. Best move before the ridge shadows fall." Vivienne gathered her coat, motioning Lily and Eli inside to pack. Jonah watched them go, the three shapes filling the doorway like a promise he didn't dare touch. He turned to Henry. "How far ahead is Kline in this game?" Henry's smile faded. far enough to make this your last peaceful hour if we linger." Jonah felt the truth settle in his bones. He grabbed the saddle, tightened the cinch, loaded the rifle. When he stepped back inside, Vivienne was helping Eli button his coat. Lily was folding the quilt she'd clung to all night. Jonah cleared his throat. "We ride now." Vivienne met his eyes. "Thank you." He shook his head once. "Don't thank me till we're past the ridge." Eli reached for him. Jonah lifted the boy onto his hip, breathing in the faint smoke scent that clung to his son's hair. "I won't lose you. Not again. Not ever." He set Eli down and opened the door. Wind swept in, sharp, clean, full of something that felt like both danger and deliverance. Vivienne stepped out first, coat snapping behind her. Lily followed with the quilt. Henry rode ahead. Jonah stood a moment longer on the threshold, staring at the cabin that had held his grief for 4 long years. Snow drifted across the steps. He shut the door, turned the key, and walked away. They were halfway to North Bend when Henry Sato raised his hand. "Hold up!" Jonah reined in, Eli leaning against him for balance. Vivienne's horse edged close, Lily tucked beneath her coat. A thin column of smoke curled into the pale sky, too straight, too clean to be accident. "That your barn, ma'am?" Jonah asked. Vivienne's breath whitened. "Yes, and that's no winter spark." They pushed on, but unease rode with them. The land was too still. Even the wind held back, as if listening. Henry guided them off the main trail, through a narrow cut in the ridge. "Best come at it high," he said. "If this is Kline, he expects you to charge." From the ledge above the ranch, the truth settled in Jonah's bones. The barn burned only on its outer wall, fire crawling slow as handwriting. No cries, no movement, no hands running buckets. "Staged," Henry muttered. Vivienne's fingers dug into her reins. "Where is everyone?" Jonah pointed to the snow, tight tracks circling, then trailing west. Too many for ranch hands, too few for a full raid. "They waited," he said, then pulled back the moment we showed. Lily pressed into Vivienne. Eli reached for Jonah's sleeve. "Lord, guide my steps," Jonah thought. "Don't let me miss what matters." A sharp rifle crack echoed from the ridge behind them. One shot, meant to be heard. Jonah wheeled his horse. "Henry, left flank. Miss Hawthorne, keep the children close." They dropped from the ledge and swept across the yard. The barn hissed with dying flame, not true fire, just a signal meant to drag them here. Then Henry shouted from the gate, "Tracks heading north!" Jonah saw them, fresh, deep, pointed straight toward the back trail, straight toward his cabin. Vivienne whispered, "Jonah, no." His throat locked. Eli felt him stiffen and clung harder. "They didn't want the ranch," Jonah said, voice low, brittle. "They wanted time." "Time for what?" Vivienne asked. Jonah met her eyes. "For whoever's already at my home." The wind rose sharply, scattering ash like dark snow. Jonah yanked his reins, fire lighting in his chest, a fire older than fear. "We ride," he said. "Now." He didn't look back at the barn. He didn't need to. A man knows when the devil has stepped through his door. They reached the ridge above Jonah's cabin just as the sun dipped, bleeding gold over the snow. The place should have been quiet. warm smoke rising from the stovepipe. Instead, the door hung open. Jonah didn't think. He was off the horse before it stopped moving. "Eli!" His voice cracked the air like a broken branch. He stormed inside. The cold hit first, then the overturned chair, the smashed lantern, the slate snapped clean in half on the floor. A single chalk mark smeared across the wood, like a child tried to write and didn't finish. Vivienne stepped in behind him, breath sharp. Lily clung to her coat, eyes wide and glassy. Jonah scanned the room. No blood, no bodies. But the blankets were dragged, footprints trampled deep, and rope fibers lay near the stove. "He fought," Jonah whispered. "Lord, forgive me. I should have been here." Henry crouched near the tracks by the door. Boots with iron heel plates, same men from the ridge. Jonah felt something in his chest tear slow, like old cloth. He stepped outside. Snow glittered under the dying light. The tracks led north, toward the abandoned cut of Red Hollow. Vivienne found the envelope pinned to the post. No name, no wax seal. She handed it to Jonah. The paper shook in his hand, though he told himself it was the wind. "Bring her to Red Hollow by midnight. Come alone. The boy stays breathing if you listen." Vivienne closed her eyes. "Jonah, I'm so sorry." He didn't answer. He couldn't. He touched the broken slate, running a thumb along the crack. Eli had held that board every day for 4 years. Lily tugged Vivienne's sleeve. He called for you," she whispered. "When they grabbed him, he tried to speak." A blow straight to Jonah's ribs. Vivienne steadied herself on the table. "Kline wants me. This trap was meant for me." "No," Jonah said. "It's meant for both of us." Henry looked toward the horizon. "Red Hollow's a maze. You rush in blind, you won't come back." Jonah rose slowly, eyes dark with something more than fury. "He took my boy." Vivienne stepped forward. "Then we get him back, but we do it smart." Jonah nodded once, but inside, a truth hammered through him like a prayer on Christmas Eve. "I won't lose my child again. Not this time. Not to any man alive." Night came down hard, cold as hammered steel. Jonah rode ahead, jaw locked, every muscle braced as if holding the world upright by sheer will. Vivienne kept pace beside him, cloak snapping in the wind. Henry followed behind, checking their trail every few yards. Red Hollow waited in the dark, but they weren't going there. Not yet. Vivienne pointed toward a lantern flickering in a lonely window. "Martha Wynne lives there," she said. "Her husband surveyed the mines before he died. He left things unfinished." Jonah didn't need details. He needed leverage, something to put weight on the scale before midnight. They knocked. The door cracked open. Martha Wynne stared out, thin as a winter branch, grief carved into every line of her face. Her eyes flicked to the snow behind them, then to the tightness in Jonah's expression. "Who's taken?" she asked softly. "My boy," Jonah said. Something inside her stilled. She stepped aside. "Come in." The cabin smelled of cedar smoke and old sorrow. A single Bible lay open on the table, pages worn from being prayed over too many nights. Vivienne removed her gloves. Martha, he's moving again. Kline, using children now. Martha's mouth trembled. Then he's become the devil my husband warned of. Jonah said nothing. He scanned the room, noting the nailed windows, the battered trunk near the hearth, the way Martha's hand hovered, protective, over a single loose floorboard. Vivienne noticed too. "You kept it," she whispered. Martha closed her eyes. "I kept everything that could cost me my life." Jonah knelt by the board. "May I?" Martha hesitated only a heartbeat before nodding. "If it saves a child, the Lord understands." Jonah pried the board up. Beneath it lay a rusted tin box wrapped in oilcloth. He set it on the table. Vivienne unwrapped it slowly, as if expecting the papers to bleed. Inside were contracts, survey sketches, ledger notes, names tied to ghost companies, signatures forged with Kline's heavy-handed confidence. And at the bottom, a scrap of paper torn from a notebook. "He means to clear the valley. The deaths won't be accidents." Jonah's breath left him like someone had struck his ribs. Vivienne's face hardened into a quiet, terrible resolve. Martha backed away from the table, shaking. "My husband died for writing that. They pushed him into a shaft, said he slipped. I buried him without answers." Jonah touched the paper. "You were meant to die next." "Yes," she whispered. "Every widow who asks too many questions does." Vivienne gathered the documents, tying them into a tight bundle. "Jonah, this is enough. If we get this into Ada Rourke's hands, she'll act. She's not blind, just outnumbered." Henry nodded. "I can deliver, quiet-like." Jonah looked at him, measuring, weighing. Then he reached into his coat and handed Henry the bundle. "Ride straight. Don't stop. If you see Kline's men, you turn into the trees and pray God rides with you." Henry tightened his reins. "I will." Martha stepped close to Jonah, placing a trembling hand over his. "Bring your boy home," she said. "No mother should know the ache of an empty chair." Jonah swallowed hard. "Ma'am, I intend to." Vivienne pulled her hood up. "We go now." Jonah stepped into the cold again, the night swallowing them whole as they rode toward Red Hollow, toward the trap, the boy, and whatever lines a man must cross to face the kind of evil that doesn't bargain. Inside him, one prayer beat steady as hoofsteps. "Lord, let me reach him before the world takes him too." Red Hollow rose out of the dark like a broken jaw. Black rock, dead trees, wind clawing at the cliffs. No moon, only the lantern Jonah carried, its light trembling with every step. He moved ahead, rifle low, boots crunching through crusted snow. Vivienne followed close, face veiled in shadows. Lily stayed with old Ben at the homestead. Henry was delivering the papers. But here, tonight, there were only two people walking into the lion's den. Jonah whispered, "Stay behind me." Vivienne didn't argue. Not tonight. They slipped between the rocks and followed the faint glow deeper into the gorge. Voices echoed, muted, rough. Jonah flattened himself against the stone. Vivienne did the same, one hand already on the pistol strapped to her thigh. Then they saw him. Eli. Tied to a support beam inside the old shaft. Hands bound, head hanging forward. Alive. Jonah felt something break loose inside his chest. "Thank you, Lord. Let me reach him." Silas Kline stood 5 yards away, coat collar up, smile razor thin. 3 hired guns flanked him, rifles ready but not raised. This wasn't a fight yet. This was theater. "You made good time, Miss Hawthorne," Kline drawled. "And you brought our cowboy." His eyes glinted. "I half expected him to sell your name for a reward." Jonah stepped into the lantern light. "I don't sell people." "No," Kline said. "You just lose them." The words hit like a thrown stone. Jonah didn't flinch. He couldn't afford to. Vivienne moved forward. "You want me? Let the boy go." Kline lifted a paper, the forged contract Jonah had seen copies of. "You'll sign this. Transfer the mineral rights. Then the child walks." Jonah measured the ground, the distance, the angle of the lantern flame. Vivienne whispered, "If I sign, he'll kill us anyway." "I know," Jonah murmured. Kline snapped his fingers. A gunman pressed a revolver to Eli's head. Something in Jonah went perfectly still. Vivienne took one breath, then another. "Kline, the sheriff already has your papers." Kline's smile twitched. "Impossible. She'll be here before dawn." "You're bluffing," he hissed. Vivienne didn't blink. "Try me." Kline cursed and gestured to his men. "Then we end this now." Jonah moved first. He shot the lantern. Darkness exploded. Fire, sparks, the scream of glass. Gunshots cracked wild. Echoes slammed against the rock walls. Jonah dove through the dark, hands finding Eli by instinct. He cut the rope fast, lifting the boy against him. Eli trembled, breath ragged, but alive. "Pa," Eli whispered, voice hoarse and real. A miracle in the dark. Kline shouted, "Find them! Kill the man! Keep the woman breathing!" But new voices rose from the ridge. Sheriff Ada's deputies, old Ben's rifle roaring like thunder. Gunmen scattered. Kline tried to drag Vivienne, but she wrenched free and Jonah seized the moment. One clean shot knocking the gun from Kline's hand without taking the hand itself. Kline fell to his knees, hate twisting his face. Ada shoved him down, irons clicking. Jonah held Eli tight, feeling the boy's heartbeat strike his own. Vivienne stepped to them, lantern light flickering across her face as the deputies relit the flame. Eli reached for her sleeve. She knelt. Jonah saw the truth settle between them. Quiet, deep, earned. Snow drifted into the hollow, soft as ash. And for the first time in years, Jonah felt the weight on his chest ease. "Thank you, Lord. You let me keep him." Behind them, the night closed around Red Hollow. Ahead, a life no longer made of running.